able to cover everything in her lecture. So, so we don't have her this morning. So if nobody has anything now, then we can turn it over to Carolyn.
And let's all mute, please, except Carolyn, of course.
Let me talk. Okay, we will go ahead and start mine then. And, oh, this is part. I prefer to leave it like this, but I know it's better looking the other way. So I will start. Well, it's not. Huh. There we go.
There you go. Yeah.
Now we got the full screen, and my apologies. I am not, let's say, super PowerPoint adept. I'm lucky that I got this much done, and I did find a wonderful picture to talk about Shinto. And before I get into it, I want to let you all know I did some rather text-heavy slides, in that I know when I was studying, especially as a trainee, I like to have everything spelled out for me, and would often like print out this kind of information and not only have pictures and then wonder, trying to remember what they said or what happened, you know, and then have, you know, separate text have to be printed out. So I went ahead and did it the way I kind of like it. My apologies. But I did throw in some pictures, of course, in between to enjoy it. And to me, of everything about Shinto, the huge takeaway that I want everybody to know is, above all, Shinto is a nature religion, really. It is total and utmost respect for nature. And in case you have any questions, I literally had my friend from Japan come over Saturday, ran this by her, and she kept stressing the respect for nature, that it's all about nature. So if that's the biggest takeaway, I want everybody to please remember that part. Now, when it goes into what Shinto truly is, it's defined as Japanese indigenous religion. Like I said, a nature religion as old as Japan itself. When the Japanese people and culture became aware of themselves, Shinto was already there. So I've seen dates from 500 BCE back to 10,000 BCE, all about, you know, the Stone Age time. So they were already revering nature. You know, it's all about revering your surroundings, essentially. So nature and God are viewed as one. It is all the same thing. It's kind of how we would say Mother Nature, that kind of thing. Nature is everything and God is in everything. So that's how they look at it. It was very influenced, of course, by the influx of all the various religions into Japan. Most notably, of course, is Buddhism, that came in about the 6th century and had a significant impact, of course, on Shinto doctrine. The term Shinto actually came about in order to distinguish itself from Buddhism, to try to people, you know, to understand the difference between the two. And some of this flexibility may be why Shinto had such an incredible longevity. You think about this 10,000 years. Now, it's funny because I'd always heard of Shinto as Shintoism. So this is where you think you know something about a topic and then you go down those rabbit holes and, oh my gosh, I went from putting some basic information up to being lost for hours and hours for the whole month looking at this. And it turns out that only because the way Western religion or Western language is, we try to describe it as a religion and call it Shintoism. But as I have for people in the know, like we docents, it's more Shinto is kind of the preferred term because it's arguably the more correct term to just call it Shinto. My friend from Japan literally called it Shintoism. So I was really surprised about that. But I think as docents, my takeaway was we should refer to it as Shinto when referring to it in the galleries. So now Shinto literally means the way of the kami, or the way of the gods or spirits. Shin being divine or kami, and Tao, meaning the way. What I found fun is this is when you go into real interesting information and you're like, oh my goodness, what have I got here? Shinto turns out is a Chinese name for the Japanese phrase kami no michi, or the way of the kami, which I found really funny for some reason. The kami, K-A-M-I, kami, and I usually use that term when I'm in the gallery and I literally say kami, K-A-M-I, so people understand it doesn't sound like kami. Kami is roughly the Japanese word for a god or a deity, a divinity, or a spirit. It's really not, for many of the things I studied, there is no literal word that defines kami. So they sound like they prefer us to say the way of the kami, as opposed to, you know, the way of the spirits or the way of the gods or something like that. Little word to the wise. Now, it is a faith that doesn't have a founder. It has no prophets. It's polytheistic. It has many, many kami. They jokingly call it 8 million kami and 8 million kami. And it's based on nature. There is no holy book or text to outline its principal beliefs. There's no fixed dogma or body of belief. And I found out there is a book called the Kojiki, and it tells of ancient matters such as the creation. There's also a book, the Nihon Shoki, that has the Japanese chronicles that are regarded as sacred books, but those were both written in the 712 and 720 respectively, CE. So it was more of a compilation of the oral traditions of ancient Shinto and about the history, the topography, the literature of ancient Japan. So it's possible to construct Shinto doctrine based on interpreting those myths and the religious practices they describe. So that's as close as they get. There's no Bible, no Quran, nothing, you know, even close to that kind of thing. Now, the important elements before we get to the pictures is, to me, Shinto is a very optimistic faith. I love this. Humans are thought to be fundamentally good. Anything that's considered evil or bad are caused by the evil spirits, the evil kami out there playing tricks on everyone. So I just kind of love and take that to heart. And it's one of those things where good and bad is always have to be, it has to be taken in context. Like that there's like some old story about, someone broke their arm. Oh, that's bad. No, it was good. He wasn't drafted to war right then. And it goes back and forth. So you have to have the context of it on what's good and bad, which I really like. The purpose of most Shinto rituals is to keep the evil spirits away. Most of that's done by purification, the prayers, and an offering to the kami. It's a religion of ritual actions and observance. It's more what you do truly than what you believe. And it's so interwoven in the Japanese culture in general, it's almost inseparable as an independent body of thinking. And this is where I was having fun. Japanese people don't even really think of Shinto specifically as a religion. It's simply a cultural aspect of Japanese life. If you ask many Japanese, and they've done surveys, many deny being religious at all. I'm not religious. Some are even atheist. But if you ask them if they're Shinto, at least 80% openly agree with, of course, to be, Japanese is to be Shinto. It is a cultural inheritance more than anything. And I love that my friend completely agreed with that. She said, I now know more about Shinto than most of her Japanese friends. So this is our spirit house, our being San Diego Museum of Art. When I was in training 15 years ago, they actually called it a Shinto shrine, but now they call it the spirit house. Hopefully someone has a report on that. It's beautifully constructed, as you can see, all wood, and it has little emblems of the Tokugawa clan. And this is the type of spirit house, Shinto shrine type object that would be kept in a home. It's not a huge one, but this is for a big and wealthy home, more like perhaps someone from the Tokugawa clan would have that one. Now, this is where we pay respect to our kami, the Shinto shrine, the jinja. I've also seen it spelled Jinju. So the Shinto shrines in Japanese don't just play an important role in history, they're inherent part of daily life today. I saw videos that were so cute. As children are heading off to school, they will stop by a Shinto shrine and do a little offering in order to do well on their tests that day. So if there's a big exam day, it's just packed with kids on their way to school. Just part of everyday life. It is a place of worship and dwelling for one or more of the kami, these gods. Sacred objects of worship that represent them are stored in an innermost chamber that nobody has seen. Nobody gets to see that part. But people visit the shrines to pay respect and to pray for good fortune. There literally, I read one number that said 96,000 shrines in Japan. They're confirmed 80,000 shrines. It is amazing. They're everywhere. Every community has them. Big cities have several. They're saying there's 8 million kami, like I had said. And the one big time of the year that shrines are the most important, they have festivals throughout the year, based very much on nature and the seasons, but especially for the new year, literally from January 1st to the 3rd, almost every single person in Japan visits their local shrine or a big shrine. The festivals are called Matsuri, and they all go, millions just go to the shrines for, good wishes for the new year. It's where they're partying it. Now, what I found fun is that they also bring the newborn babies within a few weeks of their birth. And then the odd birthdays, for some reason, it's 3, the 5th birthday and the 7th birthday, they dress up their children. It's adorable, little kimono, and bring them over to the Shinto shrine for blessings. And then male and female coming of age ceremony, when you turn 20, you're brought to the Shinto shrine and dressed up. It reminded me very much of like a quinceañera that they would have for Mexican little girls, but these are for male and female. And many couples perform or have their wedding ceremonies performed at a Shinto shrine. But many of them love Western wedding ceremonies now, which is kind of fun. I tried to find a decent map. This was as close as I could get of where all the Shinto shrines are. But you can see all the blackened part are literally Shinto shrines all over. Some are out in the water, several on some islands off of Japan, millions of them. Now they can be as simple as the one on our left here, where it's just a little shrine with the basics, or as elaborate as this giant Shinto shrine. That one is where one of the Tokugawa deceased resides in here now, and it's a combo of the Buddhist and Shinto shrine. So it's very elaborate, as you can see. They can be amazingly different all over. Ise Shrine is the one that reminds me the most of our spirit house, that we have in the museum, and it is considered Japan's spiritual home. It turned out my dear friend, who I just spoke with about all of this, grew up in the little town of Ise, and she said the entire community is designed in this old-fashioned wooden, type of structures throughout the entire community to just pay respect, because these are originally done with no nails. They were done in about 700. They started these shrines, so it's been thousands of years of wood grooved joining. This is where the most sacred mirror and the sacred jewels of Japan are kept, and more than 6 million people come here as tourists and visitors every year to the Ise Shrine. It is truly the most important Shinto shrine of all. Now, many of these shrines have specific purposes. There are shrines for pregnant women, one is safe delivery, one's for fishermen to return safely from seas, one's for taking entrance exams. My friend told me that she made a pilgrimage to Meiji to make an offering to do well on her entrance exams to get into graduate school and college, to come here back in the day. Almost every local community supports a shrine financially, which I found interesting. I wondered how these were kind of conducted and held. And the shrine is managed usually by a head priest, which I had to also look into. The priests sometimes are just part-time. They keep it, clean and presentable and handle the prayers that are there. The priests, or in the case of smaller one, just a member of the elder committee of the shrine, the Sodai. Some homes and offices have little small Shinto shrines, like I mentioned, to ward off the evil spirits, protect the buildings from fires, earthquakes, typhoons, all the bad things in Japan. Little private households have an ancestor shrine or a kamidana, which I found really interesting because there's so many rules about it. They'll have the names of the family members who've passed away, because once they've passed, they are now ancestral kami. You can see how kami is in so many different kinds of ideas. They always have to have it above the eye level and kept meticulously clean. Everything has to be very clean and pure for Shinto. Shinto shrines are, I found very funny, constructed according to sacred principles, following the Chinese principles of feng shui, which is like they have to face south, sometimes east, never north and west, which are regarded as unlucky directions. And most Shinto shrines are regarded as the dwelling places of the sun goddess Amaterasu. And this is one where I can remember so well in our training. It was so fun because our manager at the time said, "Okay, are we ready for story time? I will tell you a story about Amaterasu." And when I brought this slide up, this is when my Japanese friend got very excited and paid very close attention, because it was interesting. She actually pronounced it Amaterasu, and they don't say the U at the end, Amaterasu. And it took me a minute, and I said, "Oh, Amaterasu." She said, oh, the most important goddess of all. And I love the definition where it's the great and glorious goddess of the sun. It reminds me of like King Jong-un when they say our great and glorious leader. She is an embodiment of the rising sun of Japan itself, the queen of all the kami and ruler of the universe. And the Japanese imperial family claims to have descended from her. It's that type of a story that goes back. And since we have extra time today, you guys ready for some story time? I will give you a little story time of some Amaterasu. And the reason that it's often shown, this is a famous woodblock print. It's not in our collection, but she's shown as the sun coming out. And it was interesting because I liked comparing it to our Greek and Roman mythology. And it's so different in a way. She is the goddess of light. And the story goes that she locks herself in a cave and then does like a magical spell to keep a little rock in front of this cave. And of course, the world is plunged into darkness and all problems start happening because of everything in the dark. And it turns out it wasn't an insult or a slight or someone questioning her power or divinity or anything like Zeus or the Roman gods or something you would picture would have an issue with. She felt horrible shame because her brother, God, had accidentally, in one of his practical jokes, killed a man. And she felt such shame and such embarrassment for not having been a better guide to her brother and for protecting her people better, that's why she had locked herself in this cave. And I thought this was so funny because it's very different from our thinking. It was guilt and shame that made the sun go away. So all the gods got together and they were all trying to figure out a way to draw her out of the cave. We all need sunlight. And they got this idea that they would get a farmer with some roosters. They have cockerel on all the stories. There's all different versions of the story, of course. So they got 3 roosters that would always presage dawn when you hear the light start coming out. They had a blacksmith who could hammer this nail over and over into a rock so she could hear it rumbling in her cave. They got a big pine tree. Some of their sacred trees are often pine, brought it down, hung many things to show the entrance of a great god must be there to have this beautiful pine tree with all of these things you'll see in the Shinto shrines. And then had the goddess of the arts come out with this brilliant idea. And she turns one of those wooden bathtubs upside down. And this is the one constant in all the stories. And she starts dancing on that. And you hear the thump, 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 thump of her dancing on the drum. And she's half dressed at some point, and all the gods are laughing and cheering. And inside, Amaterasu hears this interesting beat and all these, sounds. And how could they be happy and laughing without any sunlight? So she starts to try to peek out of the cave just a little bit to see what's going on. And of course, the roosters start off, and she goes, oh my. And they all tell her, oh, you need to come out. This great and glorious God, even greater than yourself, has arrived. And they have right outside the cave a mirror that someone has designed with some beautiful beads and jewels and gods. And she sees the sparkle. She sees herself in the mirror, not realizing it's her. And she starts to step out to look at this. And they quickly put one of the magical ropes around the rock so she can't reseal it and go back inside and drag her out. And the sun is restored, and it turns out it's her. So that's why almost all of the Shinto shrines have a little mirror and some jewels that they keep in the innermost chamber to represent the sun. It was a reflection of Amaterasu. So that's our fun story time. I hope you enjoyed some of that. There are many versions, just like there are for our type of mythology, but it was a cute one, and that's the big based one. So now I was real curious because in part of my time in the galleries, I often say that, to be Japanese is to be Shinto. And there is no problem with you're being Buddhist and Shinto or Christian and Shinto. And I look, there's even Hindus and Christians in Japan, as well as many Buddhists. And there's really no issue with that. I know that in the aspect, it's hard for like Christians to think of honoring these kami, but I understand from my friend who has converted from Buddhism to Christianity, that she feels that, if God created the kami and all that, it's fine to honor the nature and the kami, but you just don't put anything above God in her aspect. So the Shintos don't have any issue with you being a different religion and also honoring Shinto. Perhaps as a Christian, she said it's a different thing, because the only key concepts are really purity, which doesn't mean just the cleanliness. It means pure of your word, that you're true to your word, you're true to the community, your actions are pure and true. You keep in harmony with nature. You have a family respect, similar to Confucianism, which I found real fun. The subordination of the individual before the group. You always know Americans are very individual oriented. What I want is much more important than anything a group wants. It's the opposite in Japan. When my friend showed up, she had her mask on and she wanted to be respectful. And no, I'm worried about you. I know you're traveling soon. And I said, I know you were vaccinated. I think we're okay. But it's always, for the good of others, you subordinate yourself. And so much so, it's truly just become part of the Japanese character. Like I said, she sees it as a cultural tradition. Now, then my other question was, what's the difference between the shrine and the temple? Because both are throughout Japan. Now, most Shinto buildings are just shrines, a place for praying to the kami, as opposed to a temple, a place of worship that you go in. The temples in Japan are usually associated with Buddhism, but many are combined. They can be both Shinto and Buddhist, which is a lot of fun to try to figure out in our little Western minds here. What's interesting is Shinto shrines are there to help people communicate with the kami and venerate this divine spirit that represents all the people or objects in the natural world, not like a Western religion like Judaism or even an Eastern one of Buddhism, where we're trying to understand God and our place in the world. It has nothing to do with that. So those that follow Shinto believe the gods reside in all things, but are especially powerful in the mountains, in the forests, out of the ordinary trees, or even rocks that are unusual. And that's why you'll often find a Shinto shrine right by a beautiful old growth tree, just giant, like I could picture them in the sequoias at this point. That kind of a situation. I love this. I even found, the Iwakura, the sacred rocks. You put the, special rope around it, and this is also Shinto. That is very important. You have that. So now I have a little summary for everyone about the typical objects found in a shrine to know. And we're going to go through some of the torii gates, the shiminawa, the kamano, the purification trough, the main or offering hall, the ima and the omikuji and the onomari. Now, this one is my all-time favorite torii gate. The tories simply, 2 wood up and 2 woods across kind of thing, and that equals that. It was funny trying to understand my friend at one point. I thought she kept saying, oh, the tree is the most important. She was saying tori, tree. So the torii is everything. They are identified by the, that's how you find the shrine. It's the identifying thing. To me, it is almost the identifying thing of Japan. You see a torii gate, you automatically think Japan. They symbolically separate the sacred space of a shrine from the external world. When you enter into this area and you reach the torii gate, you're supposed to do a little bow out of respect for going into this sacred area. The simplest are just really merely 2 upright posts with 2 longer crossbars, and that's it. They're often festooned with the gohei, the twin papers or metal strips ripped to symbolize Kami's presence, and that's what got Amaterasu out. She saw those strips. And they are simply, sometimes hung on a rope like this. I love this torii gate. It has the little shiminawa rope. You can see Mount Fuji in the background. It is the sacred space to go through there. They say even the kami enter through the torii gates. We are, as mere humans, to stay to one side or the other. Never go down the center when you're going through some torii gates. That's reserved for the kami. Many times in touristy areas, they even put a bar, like a handrail up the middle. So you are automatically kept from one side to the other. You don't go through the middle ever. Here are those little gotai, the lightning bolts, I like to call them, paper lightning bolts, and the shiminawa rope. This is a very typical, I love this picture of going in because you can see all the things right here. Here's the rope that you ring the bell to wake the kami for your prayer, little offering trough that you would put in some money. I find it very interesting. I'll get to that. It's a different philosophy of even bringing the money in. Now this, the shiminawa, I cannot believe it. I had to include this picture with the people here. Do you see how big, gigantic this rope is? It used to be kind of a hemp rope they would do, or any kind of rice. They'll use any kind of rope material, but these are, they make them as big as a couple of men put together kind of thing, hanging. I can't even imagine how much this weighs. And then they'll hang the little lightning bolts, I like to say, the gohei, and even just around a tree. This is a sacred tree. You put the shiminawa. My friend told me that every New Year from December 30th till January 3rd, her father would hang a shiminawa rope over their door frame. That would be, bringing in the new year and good luck, and very respectful to have the shiminawa hanging there. So I learned a lot of little things. Now, here are some of the most famous torii gates probably that you've ever seen in Kyoto. When they go through the 1,000 gates, you go, into them like this. I've seen so many of my friends. I have yet to get to Japan. My apologies that I have not been there to give you a firsthand account. But you'll see so many people with their pictures in these gates, and they're always walking on either side, mostly because they're so packed with tourists. You have no choice but to stay to the side. Reminded me very much, if any of you remember or were in New York in 2005, and Christo put these orange gates throughout Central Park. And I went, oh my goodness, you study this and you realize it's very much like the little torii gates in a way. But this was such an interesting thing. I knew people who went to New York to see this and have their pictures under these little orange gates, because they're only there for a short time during the winter in New York City, which was really fun. And then we have a couple of woodblock prints, one by Hokusai and one by Hiroshige, showing some torii gates, one in the 36 views of Mount Fuji off the coast of Noboto, that you can see the torii here, double gate, so sacred area. And then my friend explained to me that the reason, for instance, you would have the torii gate right here on these two rocks is that these rocks would be considered kami. They themselves are a divinity because they're special or unusual rocks. So I always wondered about that. Now you guys know too. Now, some of the objects found on the way to the shrine are the kamainu, the guardian lion dogs, which if you've done the Chinese part, you think foo dogs, very similar, very similar. You can see they often have that, kind of lion look, a dog look combination. They will be outside before you get to the torii gates, or in this case, it's a small little tiny shrine. So they just have them there guarding on either side of the shrine. Or in an Inari shrine, you have the foxes. You often have one with something in its mouth. And the way I had always heard this, when you see these little foxes guarding, is that the reason there's something scrolled in its mouth, or that that's a typical thing, is that when you're handing your prayers or your wishes to them, you hand it to the fox, and then the fox delivers it to the kami. The kami don't always receive that because foxes are mischievous. and so it's not the kami's fault if you don't get your wish granted or get something true that comes through. It's the fox's fault, not the kami. So we had at one point, this was some time ago, our spirit house with our Shinto shrine foxes sitting right out in front of it like this. So very reminiscent of what it used to look like. They're not there now. We also, I just threw in some of our collection. We have some 20th century porcelain Shinto foxes. Isn't that adorable? They're just so cute. And then here are our bronze sculptures from the artist, primary artist is Nobutaro. And Sheree sitting here. You can see this one actually has a little scroll in here in his little mouth. And then we also have, this is in our collection, the cat, the bronze sculpture of a cat that's supposed to bring good fortune, to have a cat around. And when I was talking to my friend, she gave me this picture. This is my friend Kamiko with the cat. And we think of those little cats that wave at the entrance of things, and she said, oh yeah, that means bring good fortune, come and, purchase gifts, etc. So that was the only connection she could make of having a cat for a Shinto shrine is this kind of a cat, with the little waving paw. I thought was cute. We also have these incredible 16th century wood sculpture of Shinto guardian deities dressed like a Shinto priest, which we have had out before. And then these two are out right now. When I looked on our site to get the pictures, I had known them as the minister of the left and the minister of the right. Now it says Zuijin, minister of the left, and this one, Shinto deity as archer. And they used to be in their own two little cases with some space between them. And it was really fun because when we would bring tour groups through, especially the school kids, we would point out that this one, that we find the differences. What's the same, what's different? They're very different. This one has a closed mouth. He's younger. He's holding everything very differently than the older gentleman whose mouth is parted. And we would tell them, this is because the younger keep their mouths shut while they're listening to their elders to understand what's going on, right? This is like the school teacher comes out. And you'll see they're on different types of, fur bases. They're both made out of wood. But what was really fun to me is after we finish everything and describe the whole information, I would say, well, it said that it brings one good luck to walk between them. And I have to tell you, when you have a school group and all these kids would always be, all over the place, every single child would line up in a row to walk between these two before we would pass through to receive good luck. So I think there's a little bit of Shinto in all of us, always hoping for some good luck was my thought. Now, here is the purification troughs that you would do. And there is an entire procedure with these. They can be simple with one little scoop for a small shrine, or several, like at the Ise shrine that they have built up like this one with so many troughs. And literally, before going up there, you have to pick this up in your right hand. You do 1 scoop of water, you rinse off your left a little, then you put it into your left hand and rinse off your right a little. You put it back into your right, and you have a little in your left and you put in your mouth, and then you spit off, not into the trough ever, off to the side to cleanse your mouth and your 2 hands. And then you have to hold the thing up to re-clean your hand before putting it down back at the trough again. And that is so important. That's part of the purification ritual before you are supposed to be up at that shrine. And when, I was watching YouTube interviews with some of the Shinto priests, everything, all the tourists, they said, we would be more happy, that was like, if people would just adhere to the practice of purification before entering. It just is, so important to them to do that. They're called by different names. I found different ones. And I did have like a YouTube video. I don't know how to have it shared on here, of a Japanese gal showing us how to do this, and then how to do our little prayer when we get up to the main or offering hall. You can see that the basic one, when you come up for offering, there's a procedure again that you have to ring the bell to wake the kami, make sure they're awake. You throw your offering into this little box that has like little grates. So you just throw it in. And it's interesting, the amount doesn't matter. And it's seen as truly, they usually use multiples of 5 yen, because yen sounds like goyen, to have good fate, good fortune. So they try to do 5s. You can offer, up to, thousands of yen and things worth $100, whatever you can afford. It doesn't matter. It's just that you've made the offering in your heart that you've done this. And then you're supposed to clap twice, make sure the kami are hearing you. And then you bow down for your prayer to do that. Now, some things I saw said when you're done, you clap again. My Japanese friend said, we don't clap again, we just do it. You never turn your back when you back away from this. You can see almost everything has steps. That's part of the whole procedure, going up steps. But you back away from the shrine and then turn around to go. You do not turn your back directly on the kami when you're up there. Now these, you will find wooden plaques hung all over the place. It could be just a simple one if it's a smaller shrine, or this one went on forever. I found this one and it goes around like a block either side of wooden plaques just tied up, and they'll have like a little picture, and you make your prayer or wish for, good fortune, good, one person put, I wish to know, to learn Japanese better, to improve my Japanese, whatever it is, and you hang it there and it stays, and the priests bless that in their own way. Now, as you're leaving, this is the fun part. You pick up a fortune, almost like the fortune cookies that we get at Chinese restaurants. And it's a paper fortune, and it's the omikuji. And my friend was telling me now, it's real funny. It used to be that you would go up and you have a number that you pick, and then you go and turn it in, and they hand you a fortune corresponding to this number. If you like the fortune, you're supposed to keep it with you and keep it on you at all times. If you don't like it, if it's not a good fortune to you, you tie it up and you leave it at the temple or at this little place where they have them for the kami to deal with. Let the kami take care of that for you. You don't want to worry about that, which I found really kind of interesting. Is like, nope, I don't like that one. We'll leave it there. She said what's happening now in Japan, the last time she was there, and I thought, leave it to the Japanese. They have a vending machine kind of thing at some of the major sites of shrines now, where you, do your thing, and then they give you a number for you to draw out the vending machine to have your omikuji. Now, the omamari. To me, it looked like, in all of these videos and pictures I've seen, like a little gift shop of little, Hello Kitties you can buy, or little amulets and good fortune things. She said it is not this at all. It is marked with prices because it is the suggested offering. It's not purchasing, it's offering to the kami to get your omamari, to keep with you at all times. You will find the children in schools have these all attached to their backpacks. They keep them with them all the time. She said she had one she kept on her all the time. And you are supposed to, after, the year or whenever this good luck or good fortune happens, turn it back to the priest or something. You don't just throw it in the trash. It's very important. So it's a very different concept. You keep this in a little pouch and keep it with you. You're not even supposed to open the pouch necessarily. Make sure you have, a healthy baby born. You keep that with you until the baby's born, that kind of thing. Now, this is my friend Kamiko at the Ise Shrine. And it is truly the most respected Shinto shrine. And she said, this must be around New Year's when I had found this picture, because it truly 6 million people come to this Ise Shrine. And I had not known when I saw her picture of that originally what this was, but it's famous throughout Japan. Everybody tries to go to essentially the sacred home of Japan. And this is where Amaterasu's sacred mirror is supposed to be kept in the main hall, hidden away, and some of the special jewels. This is the one I always thought of that I love, and it's called the Wedded Rocks or Married Rocks. And when I brought this picture up, she's, oh yeah, this is the husband rock, and this is the wife rock, and they are joined together with this amazing Shiminawa rope and the little torii gate up here. So here's another view of it that they also have, this is a sacred space to go through with the torii gate. So, and it is Futami Okitama Jinja, and she told me where it is and what bay and the whole thing, but it's fascinating. Now I have much more respect for why they put the rope around these, studying some more about. This is more of the same shrine where they have all the other same elements that you go to, and you can make your offerings and go around. And then, so to me, in conclusion kind of thing, the 4 affirmations of the Shinto basic beliefs, I love it. Their affirmations mean things we agree are good: tradition and family, love of nature, holding it sacred, ritual purity and cleanliness. I don't know about you guys, but I grew up with the old, remember, cleanliness is next to godliness. To Japan, cleanliness is godliness, period. You must keep everything clean and everything pure. And then the festivals are Matsuri, that they pay respect to the kami, especially at New Year. And summary, there's no official scripture. Most Japanese, honestly, just visit once a year. That's what it sounds like. It's one of those things. They don't consider themselves religious, but you always go to Shinto to help your whole community. It's good for you. It's good for the community. You pray for good luck for the year. Some have their weddings there. And then they practice Shinto traditions in everyday life without realizing it. Many Japanese, she said, celebrate Christmas. Very few. There's 1 or 2% are Christian. It's just traditions they like. It's merged with the traditions and culture of Japanese. And she was telling me there's a saying, and it's so funny and so true. She just laughed. My dear friend said, you're born Shinto in Japan. You tend to marry Christian because they love the Western way of having this big ceremony. And they even have, like, she said, it's like a Universal Studios thing. It's a stage and prop set where they go through all of the Christian marrying things, but it doesn't, resonate with them. They don't know what it means, but you die Buddhist because you are buried in a Buddhist temple. They don't have grave at Shinto shrines. So remember, you're born Shinto in Japan, you marry Christian, but die Buddhist. And then finally, I have a bibliography, some of the YouTube videos, and believe me, I was down for hours on some of these. You can be lost for ages on that. Just a lot of fun to go through. And then I even found that we had something on the Shinto religion of a wood block on paper and a Shinto procession in our collection. Now, when you print this out, I am done with all this, just some of the key concepts. There were more and more. I had stuff that I just put at the end if people, wanted to study some more. But that is it for Shinto. So if I can answer any questions, I am happy to help you, anybody. I had a really good time learning this. So
I can tell.
I saw Becky's hand up. So.
Yes. Were they, if they were buried at the shrine, were they cremated?
They're not buried at a shrine ever. It's at a Buddhist temple at most.
Okay.
And yes, most people I think are cremated there, it seems.
And just a comment regarding the Emma, that kind of reminded me of, they put the prayers and everything at the wall. It's kind of like the Jerusalem wall is in Israel.
Yeah, yeah, you put prayers there, here where we put it into a fox, you know? So,
Yeah.
leave
Thank
it
you.
there. Michelle, you had a question too? Or the other? Yeah.
A number of, maybe 25 years ago, my brother was living in Asia and he brought home this gorgeous thing and said, it's a spirit house. And I was to put sacred things into it, meaning sacred things to me, like an image of a dog and so forth.
Right.
And for some crazy reason, in 3 houses, it's always pointed east.
Oh.
I mean, I just where I put it. And I
It
bought
felt
one in my
right.
home and I didn't know what it was. I said, oh, wooden spirit house.
Now you know. See,
It
and
looks
that,
exactly like the picture.
yeah, I remember when they changed ours from calling it a Shinto shrine to a spirit house. And I thought, well, that is kind of more accurate in a way. So
I have one.
yeah. Oh, cool. I wish I had one.
I'll take
Thank
a
you.
picture and send it to you.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah, this is one of those things that when Michelle asked me to do a lecture, I'm thinking, oh, sure, I do about 2 minutes on Shinto on any of my tours. You know, you do your little blurb, and I know that. I put all my thoughts down. Then I started researching it, and you go into, oh my gosh, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And there's so many levels of this and so much information out there and so many versions of what to do when you're at the shrine. Mostly be respectful. It's like going into the cathedrals of Europe. You dress respectfully, you bow, you know, act respectful. And that's really the bottom line. They like the tourists to please be respectful is all. So anybody else? Oh yes, Pat.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see our hand up, but I think Sandra had her hand up first.
Oh, sorry. That's okay. She's saying, go ahead. I see her brushing it off now. No.
Oh, okay. You mentioned the spirit house. You said it used to be called the Shinto Shrine.
Mm-hmm.
Any reason it's still not the Shinto Shrine, or they just changed the name?
I don't know for sure. Maybe Jim knows, but in my thinking, if you were to call it a Shinto shrine, it is still a religious object where you would have to have little torii gates and do the whole thing and do that. Where if it's a spirit house, it's more understood that it's now an art object. So
Oh, okay.
that's my impression of that. Why?
Okay, thanks.
Sandra?
Well, I have more comments than questions because I had the good fortune to live in Japan.
You should have done this.
No, I didn't study Shintoism or anything. I had 2 babies and I struggled to live
Truly
reasonably, getting those kids around and all. But a couple of great memories that you brought up. I am mad for kimono, and I always have been. My father brought a couple back from Japan after the surrender. He was in the Navy, and I've been in love with kimono my whole life. But that huge procession to the Meiji Shrine at New Year's was the first time there were kimono all around me, especially older women wearing full regalia with the obi, everything. And I mean, I couldn't look everywhere fast enough. I was completely enthralled because they would dress up.
Yeah, they save the kimono generally for the important processions like that.
Yeah.
You should have been here when we had that huge kimono as art presentation and things. Oh, our museum was magical.
Yes. And then another thing you mentioned was the subordination of the individual to the collective. And at least this was 87, 88. Sometimes it was kind of frustrating in a way because there's so much, they have this, what do you want to call it? The saying that the protruding nail gets hammered down.
It's true.
Yes. And it just seemed true in my observation. My last comment is you mentioned vending machines.
Oh, that cracks me up as she's telling me that.
So I have this bicycle I did, with my 1-year-old or less baby boy in the front and my 3-year-old daughter in the back. And you could ride up, there's lots of bicycles, of course, on the street, right up against a vending machine. And you could buy one machine, sold beer and whiskey. and things like that. And I would, get one tall carrying beer and take it home or something.
Uh-huh.
You didn't have to get the kids off the bike. It was very convenient. But then I asked someone once, well, how do you sell these beer and whiskey on the street? So the teenagers come and buy it. They go, oh no, they would never do that because it's against the law. They can't drink.
Right.
So no problem.
Right.
I
Right.
love that. So
You would not break the law.
yeah, thanks.
That's a great story. Oh my goodness.
Anybody else? Yeah. Gosh, thank you, Carolyn. That was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. And I love your enthusiasm because you're learning right along,
I
with us.
really
And that was
I
really,
thought, oh, I have this. I know Shinto. No, you go, oh my goodness.
yeah.
It was so fun.
Okay. So thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Give Carolyn a hand. So why don't we take just a short break, I think until 11 o'clock, and then we'll have Bob talk to us, and then we'll probably be done for the day. So, okay, thank you.
Jim, are you there?
Yes.
Oh, I was going to tell you, I have a neighbor who basically inherited this one lady's, when she passed away, everything in her house. And he was telling me, because I told him I was in training as a docent, and he says he has 4 boxes of amazing art books, and he doesn't want to give them to Goodwill. And I said, well, I would talk to you to see if you think, the docent museum or the library would be interested in the books.
Well, we do take donations, and Carolyn, who has stepped away, is the co-librarian or assistant. Terry Holt is the librarian, and the normal procedure now is, because we get overwhelmed with books, is we ask the donor if they mind whether, if say we already own that book,
Yeah.
they mind whether we would put it in a used book sale and use the funds from that to buy other books.
Right.
And because what they're talking about right now is reviving the docent used book sale.
Right.
So it's a 2-tiered thing. We would get the donated books. We'd see if we already own it. Sometimes if the new copy is better than the one we have, we'll deaccession the old one and bring the new one in. Carolyn's back. Carolyn, Becky's talking about a neighbor friend who is thinking of donating 4 boxes of art books to the docent library.
Okay.
So I was just explaining that we're getting back to the point where we're probably going to start having the docent used book sale. So we do welcome donations. I don't think we would have to work it out with Terry about how we get the books to the library.
Yeah, Terry and I were actually discussing it while she and I were in the library last week working, putting all the books away.
Mhm.
Because we each know several people with several boxes they've been holding on to for 2 years, waiting to bring it back down. And we would love to do it like normal. It's the 3rd Tuesday in July and do the whole thing. But it would all have to be docent run again, not because we don't have a librarian over there. April's gone, right? So.
Well, if you're interested, I could bring the books because he's just a few doors down from me, and I could bring the boxes with me sometime at a prearranged time. I was going to go through them and see, and I could take some pictures also and send them to you if that.
We'll have to do the pricing and stuff. Our librarian used to take care of how much books were worth, so we'd have to look them up and do all that. So it'll take some pre-work.
Yeah, he does not, he's going to give it to us. And even if you chose to sell it and get the profits, I just knowing Stanley, it would not bother him at all.
Oh, no, that's how it runs. We get
Yeah.
donated books, and then they raise funds for the docent library that we've always shared with the museum to purchase new books that we need. We, are looking for something in, some new art we haven't seen. So.
Okay, great. I'll look at the books and maybe take some pictures for Wednesday, Jim. How's that sound?
That sounds great. And the thing, if you're going to bring them, they'll be heavy, I suppose, if there's 4 boxes. The best way we usually suggest people do that is to drive, where the back entrance of the museum is on
Yeah.
Old Subway.
Right.
To drive a little further towards the theater and go to the loading dock
Yes.
and offload them there and then drive away and park. But
Okay.
that means you have to have a prior arrangement so that there will be someone at the door to take the books inside. And
Okay.
then we'll get maintenance or someone to drag them down to the docent library.
Okay, great. We can maybe talk about that Wednesday also. Okay,
Absolutely. Thank you.
thank you.
Michelle,
Yes.
are you working on the modern contemporary plans yet?
Yes, I'm starting that.
I just wanted to let you know they are making some major changes in modern contemporary. Again, we have the Bloomberg loans in now and some other ones. And they're taking down California colorists and putting some other things in. So I have the new checklist that I will
great.
send. I think I just got it late Friday, so I'm going to send it out to you later today.
Okay, good. Yeah, the assignments will probably be the last thing that I do before, the
Right.
semester starts, but that's helpful to know in advance.
Jim, I think I'm doing a modern and contemporary tour on the 13th. So could you send me that list as well, please?
I'll make a note.
Is that a virtual tour or in museum?
That's at the museum.
At the museum, okay.
Well, when I do it, I'll send it to all docents, but I'll just make a special note. I tend to do these updates whenever there's a gallery change. Okie dokie.
We're getting people back here, it looks like.
I'm sorry, one thing. Let me just finish what I was saying. The one tricky thing, and I'm not trying to make a snide comment about the lender, but quite often Tony Bloomberg will lend certain things and tell us this is the length of time. And then she'll change her mind because she's having a party and she'll say, I want all this stuff out back to my house by next week. So we can't always count on it all being there as long as they tell us it's going to be, but it's our best estimate. So I'll send all that out. Okay, back to Michelle.
Okay. Great. So Bob is going to talk to us for however long he needs to talk to us and get us all ready for his tour on Wednesday. So Bob, take it away.
We'll try not to make this too terribly long, and you could all relax. It's very informal, and I'm just going to give you an overview of a technique of doing tours that is called visual thinking strategies. Very sort of cumbersome title. But where this emanated from was in 1991, the Museum of Modern Art in New York became concerned about their teaching program and what visitors to the museum actually took away from the experiences that the museum had lined up. And the museum had the usual kinds of education programs. They had tours, lectures, audio visuals, labels on walls. I'm going to look at notes as well. Workshops, teacher workshops, and brochures. And the board of the museum became concerned about what visitors were taking away from their experience at the museum. So they charged Philip Yanawain, who was the educator, the chair of the education department, to carry out an investigation of that. And he hired a woman from Harvard who was a cognitive psychologist who was interested in how people think about art. And her name was Abigail Housen. And being a scientist, the first thing that she wanted was data. And it isn't necessary to go into the methodology that she used to gather the data, but what she came away with was that visitors retained very little of what was imparted to them during the course of the various educational possibilities available to them. And what they retained, they retained only bits and pieces, often with misunderstanding. So that beginning viewers, novices to a museum, got very little out of wall labels and out of lectures, that more experienced visitors to the museum really derived more from those sources. What she found, Abigail Housen, was that people really enjoyed looking at art in their own way and to explore it on their own, except that when they timed how much space people provided in front of a painting, that they were only there for about 18 seconds with eyes on canvas. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but I remember going to the Guggenheim Museum and starting at the top level. For those who know it, that it's a circular ramp that goes down the length of the museum from top to bottom. And by the time you get to the bottom, you're not even spending 18 seconds because you are visually fatigued and you accelerate through the exhibition. So that time in front of the canvas, eyes on the canvas, becomes very limited as people go through an exhibition. Housen concluded that that the audiences are engaged with the paintings to the degree that they spend time on it, but they have very little viewing skills. And it becomes a question of whether or not we think that the museum should get involved not only in imparting information, but in teaching viewing skills, how to look at a painting. And what viewing skills involves is not only engaging the eyes, but engaging memories, engaging an openness to individual interpretation. An individual interpretation of a painting, especially in the context of the Museum of Modern Art, is a very critical part of what people take away from the museum. There's permission given during the course of a tour, possibly, to wonder at what a painting means. And we all need to understand that even the most classical paintings, that over the course of time, the interpretation of those paintings changes with time, that it's not a fixed interpretation by any means. Now, working with a group and encouraging a dialogue is one way to talk about and to engage people in the art and to engage them in thinking about the art. There's a quote attributed to Kandinsky, the modern art painter, if you will, that dialogue amongst visitors helps us to move into the picture and helps us to live in the picture so that the picture becomes a plane for us to participate in rather than to have information delivered to us sort of from the mount. Now, even with encouraging visitors' participation and interpretation, it's still the responsibility of the museum, the docent, or in some places called the facilitator, to have accurate and pertinent information to the discussion and to add art historical data and add contextual information about when the painting was done and the environment in which the painting was done in. However, it is not to overwhelm the interpretation of the visitors to the painting, that the provision of information should be to further the discussion and to further the involvement of the visitor learning how to look at a painting and to focus their eyes on the canvas at all times. According to some essays, that the purpose of the docent is to bring people and the art object together, which is different than bringing people and information about the art object together. Slightly different in terms of the emphasis, that the information that we provide needs to be accurate and pertinent, but accurate and pertinent to the discussion and interpretation of the art by the group that we're leading through a dialogue. Now, not everyone agrees with this, and it's not done in most or museums, but it's done in many museums. It's done at the Getty, and it's done at the Museum of Modern Art. And interestingly, one of my grandsons is now a sophomore in medical school, and part of that curriculum is going to the art museum in Toledo, and that they are encouraged to have eyes on the canvas and to interpret what they're seeing, so that it is done along the precepts of visual thinking strategies. Now, I have about 5 years of experience leading tours like this while I was a docent at the Yale Center for British Art, which is the largest collection of British art outside of the United Kingdom, and is in a building designed by Lou Kahn, for those of you who know architecture, who was the architect for the Salk Institute here in La Jolla. And so those 5 years were spent doing these kinds of tours. And I have to tell you that not all tours were done in this manner, that when I was leading that program, I would go out to retirement communities and senior centers and do an introduction to how the tour was going to be conducted. And then we encouraged people to come for 2 visits. And the visits were usually sitting in front of well-selected paintings that had a significant narrative in them, and that during the course of an hour, we would only cover 4 paintings. And a good deal of it was learning how to look at a painting. By the second visit, they were so enthusiastic that as we walked through the museum, they would say, "Can we talk about that painting? Can we talk about that?" And I know we have paintings selected for you, but they became very enthusiastic about how to discuss a painting. As Kandinsky pointed out, they began to live within the painting. And what we also found was that as more and more docents got trained in the technique, that they modified how they did their regular tours so that they were more open to asking questions and encouraging participation. Now, there's a problem with asking questions, that a docent may ask a group of questions or ask a group a question because the docent wants to bring out a particular point about the painting. It might not really reflect what someone in the group is wondering about the painting. So that asking a question, although it sounds like you're opening it up, you might actually be narrowing it down because you're asking that question based on the information you have about the painting, not necessarily what the visitor or the audience in the group is wondering about. So encouraging wondering is one of the aspects of this technique, and that comes out as the discussion progresses. So Michelle, maybe this would be a good time to show that one slide, if I think you got it all on 1 or 2 slides. Michelle, is she here? There we are. So my screen is jumping around. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it filling the entire screen?
No.
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 Michelle, is there some way to fill the entire screen? There we are. Does everybody have it on their screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
So the way this is conducted, this is a painting by the French artist Robert Delaunay, and it's from 1915, as you could see, and it's an oil on canvas. And you might think it's rather straightforward, but there's considerable amount going on in this painting, as you probably know or can see. So the way of this type of tour would be started is, what is going on in this picture? And we're not going to have a discussion today because we're going to do that on Wednesday when I'm, in the classroom with you. And we would look at the painting for about a minute or two, and not say anything. And then the docent facilitator would say, what is going on in this painting or in this picture or with this work of art? And whatever the group then points out, that, well, there's a woman sitting here who appears to be naked and is looking at a book. The facilitator then would say, yes, there's a woman sitting there, and in the left side of the painting, there appears to be what might be a book, so that everybody in the group is looking at that same thing. And then in this painting, this question seems a little odd, but it is, what do you see that makes you say that? And what that does is that encourages the audience to really describe what they are seeing. How does the artist here represent a nude woman? And you might say, well, I mean, that's very apparent. But on the other hand, you would say, well, look at her hair, how it comes down her back, and about the color of her skin. And is that really skin color? And what is it doing having all those circles in it? And look at the other circles in the painting, so that you get people to describe what they are actually seeing. And how do you know that's a book? Well, look at how it's laid out there. And what else do you see in addition to the book? And then you have the opportunity for someone to say, well, I think there's a mirror there. And the mirror may be, there's yellow in the mirror, and there's something that is a little green. And does it suggest a face? I think there may be a face there, so that you really focus on what somebody is seeing. Now, the facilitator then links all of these things together, so that you might, as the docent facilitator, you might say, yes, we see that there are circles on her back and coming down towards her buttock area, and those circles are in the back of the painting. And then you see something, as you pointed out, that looks like a book, and maybe a mirror and a face. And then what else can you find in this painting? And that question about what else can you find in this painting allows somebody to say, well, look at the colors, look at that. So in the background, that sort of pink wine color, and then the blue, and then there's that kind of funny yellow in the back. And then it's sort of repeated to the left, but her head is blocking it out. And it encourages someone to look around the painting and to point out everything that they're seeing. And you could say, okay, so you see that blue and that sort of wine color in the back. What else do you find in this painting? Well, look at her leg. Look at that blue that you see. and you know it's a leg because of the shape of it, and you see her thigh is still yellow. And look, she's wearing a blue shoe on the one leg that you see. Although she's nude from the top up or where she's sitting up, what is with the blue leg and the blue shoe? So that it encourages the visitor, the audience, the person on the tour to continue to look at the painting. Look at those circles in front of her, how it repeats the circles that are in the back. Now, you might say, well, you're not giving them a lot of information about Robert Delaunay and, when it was painted. Well, is that what people really remember when they leave the museum? And if we go back to the research that Abigail Hausman did, the answer is no. What they may remember is how to look at a painting and how this painting they contributed to the conversation about it. They were able to pick out things that they wanted to point out to the group. And as Kandinsky pointed out, in the dialogue, people begin to live within the painting. So there are two references down at the bottom, as you can see. One is a book by Philip Yanaway that has to do with visual thinking strategies. And the other is a book by Rika Burnham, primarily. Elliot Howe Lee also was involved in teaching in the art museum. And I have copies of those books that I'll bring with me on Wednesday. So Michelle, I think that's enough of an introduction to what we're going to be trying to do on Wednesday. And for those who want, I could hold the books up. So this is Teaching in the Art Museum by Rika Burnham. And this is Visual Thinking Strategies by Yanaway. Okay, so on Wednesday, I'll be at the museum. I'll be at the classroom, and we're going to look at Japanese woodblock prints and a painting, and have this type of discussion. And I hope you're open to it. And I'm ready to answer any questions.
It looks like Betty and Carolyn have questions.
Yes.
Thank you, Bob, for that fabulous introduction. I just wanted to recommend for all of the trainees that you YouTube VTS, or Visual Thinking Strategies, and you can see Philip Yanaway demonstrating this technique with a work of art. And I think that's a really good preparation for your discussion that you'll have with Bob on Wednesday.
And if I may, I'm so glad, Bob, that you mentioned the medical students and your son doing this, because I have had groups of medical students over from UCSD, et cetera, come in, and they were, I guess, surprised that this is part of what they're supposed to do now, and looking at the art and trying to do it. But by the end of it, they were so receptive and so open, and they would notice things about the art that I would say normal humans don't really pay attention to, because as a medical person, they would note, oh, that person has, pronounced goiter or whatever, I don't know what it was. But I wanted to share also something so funny when you held up the Delaunay. The funniest thing is I did this exact thing with some students who are always the most fun and most receptive for these kind of things. They love saying, what they see, etc. And one wonderful, very know-it-all, outstanding student said, well, obviously this woman is checking her laptop for the weather to know what to wear. Which amused me to no end, but it was just so cute, because to a child, they don't think of a dressing table, with a mirror no clue about that, let alone a book open there. You're sitting down to look at your computer to see what, you should put on for the day because you don't know what the temperature is going to be. So you get some real fun answers this way, and it makes it a very enjoyable tour. So thank you.
Well, thank you for those comments from both of you. When I was at Yale, we actually did medical student visual thinking strategy tours. And so the class that we usually dealt with was the second year class in medical school. And we would select really complicated allegorical paintings for them to look at, so that there was a lot of exchange of information and ideas, and drawing on their abilities to accurately discuss what they're seeing and to be able to verbalize it. But I mean, one of the things that comes about in a complicated painting is, let's say, for example, someone is looking horrified or shocked or in pain. And the trick is to get them to describe what they see that makes them think that someone is in pain or shocked or horrified. I mean, it's very easy, we know, for someone to say, well, look how sad that person looks. But then when you really focus on that, what is it in the features, in the way they're standing, in the way they're holding their arms, that make them look sad? And that's the critical thing about visual thinking strategies. Now, I did want to add that, even in our museum, not all the tours are done as passing tours. Everybody has their own style. And that style very often includes encouraging comments from the visitors, the people on the tours. But I did want to add the caveat that by asking questions and inviting comments, you're also bringing it down, you're narrowing it in some ways. Maybe having the audience ask questions and then using those questions as a basis for dialogue might be a strategy to use. So there are many ways to go about a tour. Anything else?
Kathy, I saw you had your hand up earlier.
I don't know if this is a good question now, but okay, if you look at the title of that piece, it kind of gives away what it is. So how would you keep them from seeing the title if you wanted them to think like the title of that piece? It says what she's doing, but how could you keep them from seeing the title?
Well, it's a very interesting question and something I hadn't thought of for a while, but because it's been more than 3 years since I moved here from New Haven, Connecticut. But now that you asked the question, we did paste over the wall label so as to not give that away. I think, though, this painting that I selected was a rather simple painting and straightforward. When you really go through and pick out paintings that are best for a VTS type tour, the title doesn't matter very much. And towards the end, we sort of forgot about it. But maybe that particular painting would be good to cover the title.
Well, I will just intervene and say nobody had better ever tape anything over any label in the museum.
There you go.
You'll get frog marched out of the museum real quick. But what we have always recommended is just the doesn't just stand right in front of the label so no one can see it. So, because they wouldn't want the risk of having tape damaging the wall or the label or anything like that. So.
Okay, I don't think we damaged anything, but we would. That certainly hurt.
If you want the gallery attendants to pounce on you,
okay.
You
can
shine a flashlight at a painting. You can shine a laser at a painting, or you can tape something up over the label, and you'll find out how quickly they react. Back to Sandra had a hand up, and then Ray.
Yes, I realized at some point when the docents were offering some of these strategies, in the past year on the, just like the docent Friday meetings, which were so exciting and fascinating, these new ways of engaging. One of the questions that was suggested, I don't know when or how, but it was, what do you see in this painting that no one else might notice? And I realized that it set up a sort of competition among the group, the visitors, that even then could set up a lot of disappointment if someone else noticed the one who had chosen. So I just thought, well, maybe if you said, what is something you're seeing in this painting that you would never notice if you were just walking past it or stopping briefly to look at it? So it's more, not competitive, but sort of their own observations. I just wanted to.
Well, that, Sandra, I think that's a good point. And that's why the third question is, what more can you find?
Right.
So it doesn't set up that competitive aspect of it.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's important to keep drilling in a way down to what more can you find, because you'll be amazed what then comes out during the course of the tour.
Yeah, that works great. Thanks.
Ray?
So Bob, you chose an interesting painting because even though the surface narrative may look obvious, the reason Delaunay was painting it and the philosophy behind it and what he was exploring with color won't come out naturally to the audience. So I would think that, as a docent, you might want to leave them with something deeper that they wouldn't get from the surface. So you could do all of your exploration the way you've outlined, but I would be really wanting to give them that extra sort of insight that isn't necessarily right on the surface. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And that's why I included the statement to provide accurate, pertinent historical data as the discussion goes on. So that in that Delaunay painting, when they start talking about the circles and the color, it's possible to talk about very briefly the relationship that Delaunay had to Cubism and how he felt the need to add more color and to explore color and to bring that into the paintings at the time. And then you could even get a little more technical about talking about the movement and things of that sort. But yeah, the point is to provide briefly accurate and historical information that also furthers the discussion. So once you point that out in that painting, you could say, well, what else do you see about the color that is unusual? And what more can you find about the color? And someone might point out the blue leg and the blue shoe that, had not yet been commented upon, or something of that sort.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just add on to that. And I think I'd like to suggest to our trainees that you'll see a parallel between this VTS system and what we've been trying to teach you about nail them to the work of art. We're trying to encourage you not to just walk up to a new work of art and give us author, title, date, what movement or style it comes from or whatever, but to rather get them to look and think about the work of art. And then you sort of sprinkle in those factoids and those things that put the work of art in context. So while we haven't really been pursuing VTS strategies directly, we've kind of been working in parallel. In other words, working with sort of the same goals, if you know what I mean. And I would just add one little thing, and we'll talk more about this on Wednesday during Bob's presentation, but the museum doesn't endorse or intend to use a pure VTS system in any of our tours. We would prefer a sort of a hybrid. where we weave the VTS questioning methods into a sort of partial fact-based discussion. Does that make any sense? And we're going to look at another one of these later on, I think, when we get to the last few weeks of this segment called ODIP. Am I right, Michelle? Which is another kind of questioning strategy. And so we're sort of hoping to take the best elements of these different approaches and convey them to you so that you can sort of meld them together into a really effective strategy. Is that fair to say, Michelle?
Yes, definitely. I don't know that we're going to have a talk on ODIP. ODIP was what Betty was doing with our tour of the Chinese collection. We will, as we move on, start to working that in. You know, there's only so much we can get in, but yes, that will definitely be covered.
Yeah, but this is one of those. This is one of those areas where we're not necessarily having a formal lecture on something, but as we go through the exercises, we're going to try and have you start implementing elements taken from these approaches. So they become part of your routine.
To support what Jim is saying is that the pure VTS, or as pure as I was able to make it, which, you know, was not rigid in any way, was to a select group, particularly retirees that I would talk to in advance of their coming to the museum, so that their expectations were preset. And if you do a real VTS type tour, you know, 15 minutes in front of a painting is probably a minimum amount of time, properly selected works of art, so that in the course of an hour, you might just cover 4 paintings. But what we found, as Jim was saying, that the idea of how to engage visitors in a discussion of a painting leaked into all of the other tours, and that the provision of information to them was part of that sort of hybrid arrangement. And I think people just coming into the museum expect to see more than 4 paintings on a tour. And I think that expectation is what we need to meet.
That's a good point. And right now with our new in-person tours, we're only even really talking about a 30-minute tour because of the lingering COVID. We're trying to limit the amount of time people are exposed to each other in the galleries. So, I mean, that would mean if you did a straight VTS thing, you'd have 2 paintings at most in a tour. And that would be, I think people would go away feeling kind of cheated. So the point is we need to adapt, and we need to bring in the best elements of these new sort of strategies. But I've been talking too long. I think I'll turn it back to Michelle. There's some people with hands up.
Let's start with Pat, then Pam, and then I see Jojo. Okay.
Robert, have there actually been any studies showing that, putting aside med students, and it helps them observe, that people on tours actually enjoy this type of tour better? Because most people I know, when they go on a docent tour, they want to hear what the docent has to say. A lot of times they're paying for it, and museums want to hear it. And my worst nightmare would be to be on some sort of a tour where everybody's talking except the docent. And there's like, you know, the docent is not telling me or imparting their information. But I just wonder, do studies actually show that tourists prefer this type of tour? They ever actually compare them?
Well, that's a very good question. And I do not know of data that supports an answer to your question. But I could tell you from personal experience that when I did these kinds of tours, that the people who were engaged in them became very engaged and enthusiastic about it. And I think, as Jim was pointing out, the idea is not to conduct purely VTS type tours, but to be able to feel free enough as a docent to encourage people to make comment and interpretation. At the beginning of the tour, it's very good to set that expectation so that, and also to set the expectation that you will limit that so that, you know, on a tour, you have to be careful when you start inviting comment, because there's often someone in the group that does enjoy talking, so that you have to be able to limit it at the same time. So there's a sort of a pull and push kind of sense of it. But people do become very enthusiastic about the dialogue, is the best I could answer that, Pat.
And yeah,
Okay,
in
thanks,
addition
that's
to that-
helpful. I can see where, as part of it, I definitely understand why, it'd be useful to have it as part. But
Yeah.
thanks, that answers my question. It's great.
Yeah. And Pat, we always say too that it's important to gauge your audience at the beginning. So clearly, like taking someone like you or anyone in the class on a tour, I mean, we're a knowledgeable group and we know, more about art than maybe the average person. So we have different expectations, where if you have school children or people who aren't exposed to art, maybe, we need to engage them in a different way. So this is, as Bob was saying, this is another way to start to engage people, because, we do have different audiences.
And before you go on to the next question, I just wanted to add and circle back to our practice. If you all remember, in your written reports, we ask you to give us 3 questions you would ask about that work of art you're reporting on. So again, I'm not criticizing here, but I mean, some of you may have just think, oh, this is just, formality. We don't need to worry about it too much. But the intent of it and why it's in those written reports is to make you think about this kind of thing. What questions would you ask a group to sort of be a catalyst to get the discussion going and to get people thinking about the work of art on a deeper level? So those questions are really important. They're not just, check the box, okay, I did it. But actually give them some thought. It's really important. Sorry.
Yeah, we're going to start paying more attention to those too. We do kind of let them kind of fly by under the radar, but it has been pointed out to us that, sometimes those questions, we need to respond and keep people focused on that. We want to open up the dialogue and not just ask them a question that has a specific answer and so on. So those of us who are reading the reports are going to be focusing on those questions a little bit more. So anyway, Pam.
Thank you, Bob. That was wonderful. And Jim has brought up some really good points as well. I've had experience both in the museum and in teaching using the VTS. And I love the VTS because in the right situation, you have this incredible sense of engagement, because you have people asking questions. All you have to do is say, what do you see in this picture? And the questions that you asked, and all of a sudden you have a completely non-threatening engagement. And then to go to what Ray said, what they do is they make meaning out of detail. And this is what doctors do. If you go into the doctor's office and the doctor happens to notice there's some kind of bluishness around your fingernails, for instance, what he's doing is looking at detail and making meaning. Now, is this appropriate to use on our tours? Jim is right on. VTS takes a really long time. In a classroom situation, I was maybe able to get to 2 paintings. In the museum, Pat brought up a good point. They want to hear about it. But if we pull, as Jim says, the very best of these questioning techniques, then they're appropriate. Full VTS, perfect for a classroom. We should all go through the process in learning about art. But on a tour, maybe not so much.
Well, and if I can interrupt one more time, because I know we have more questions, but we have quite a bit of time. This again has to be tailored also to your audience. And I think Bob brought that up very well about how the ones he was doing were more for an informed, prepared audience, older, retired folks and that sort of thing. But just put yourselves into a tour made up of middle school kids. Are they going to actually want to ask questions? So many of them are very defensive. They're afraid of their peer pressure and what their peers will think of them. And they don't want to ask a question that makes them look stupid. And so it's like prying a bad tooth out of someone's mouth, with pliers to get them to ask a question. So I guess my upshot is that when you are bringing questioning techniques into your various tours, you got to take into account who the group is you're touring, and the grade level, the age level, and a bunch of tourists coming into the museum from out of town might be different from a bunch of local art aficionados who live in San Diego. So, and those are things that are sometimes hard to decide. And you can often start out your tour by sort of just engaging with the visitor and just chit-chatting about, oh, where are you from? That sort of thing. Just so you get I call it taking the temperature of your group. You find out where they're from, what their interests are, and it means you have to do a lot of things on the fly. In other words, you can't prepare your whole tour like we do with passing tours, where you write out a whole script and you're going to follow the script and memorize it. It just doesn't work that way with a real tour in the museum. So it's something you have to develop over time. Okay, sorry, Jojo.
Well, when I raise my hand, I have some comments, or I have something to share, similar to Michelle or James. I'm teaching teenager American-born Chinese kids here on Sunday for Chinese. The only thing I figure out is asking question is a very good strategy, because you ask them and allow them to think. When they think and then you teach, it's very effective. And the other thing I think works really good for this audience is if whatever you teach is related to their life, their current life, and they will start to learn. If it's not related, it's so hard for them to memorize everything, or for them to get the information you wanted. Here we are at the museum. For me, I do not know much about arts. I learned a lot during the past month of training, and I study a lot. I'm still not knowing too much about the arts. So I'm started thinking of the audience the guests come to the museum. How much do they learn about? How much do they know about all this, like how to appreciate the art, and are we really interested in all those details, like which year is the art made? Or let's say 30 minutes of tour, we see 8 or 9 paintings. What is left after the touring? I was just wondering. We want to teach them a lot of things that we learn here as adults, and we know a little bit better. But how much do we really want them to learn, like during this 30 minutes of tour? I would think if my student, after an hour of teaching, he can remember 5 points, that's good enough. And I was wondering, as a docent, how much of the information is proper, or how much information that you pass will really get into those audience?
Well, look, can I just try and answer that a little bit, and then we have Betty waiting to talk. First of all, I think Bob presented the data that led to the development of the VTS program, in that the most important thing we can teach is how to look at a work of art. So maybe they won't remember the artist's name or the date the painting was done, or 99% of what you told them, they won't remember it when they walk out the doors of the museum. But if you can impart to them how to really get into, peel away the layers of a work of art, that's a lifelong skill that they can take with them and apply it to any work of art. So I think that's number one. And number two, a lot of the information we're going to provide them with any given work of art we don't expect them to remember, but it's important at the moment because it helps them understand the work of art. So they may forget the context when they walk and go to the next painting. But the point is, in the moment, if that context or historical information we give them helps them understand that particular work of art. You see what I'm saying? So we don't expect them to walk out of the museum and, we're going to give them a test when they leave and they're going to be able to name all this data and information. That's not what's going to happen. And one of the things we really want, as Bob said, was to get them to look at a work of art and understand how to look at it. But more importantly, also, we want to cultivate in our visitors, especially our young visitors, a love of art that makes them want to come back to the museum again. That, that dispels any kind of fear of a museum or, the strangeness of it and all of that, and makes them actually have fun so that they do in fact want to come back again. So, I mean, those are more important things, I think, than the factual data. So I've talked too long. Betty.
Jim, I just have to intrude that you just made my day. That I think your comments are just absolutely terrific, and that it's very nice to hear that one of our goals is not only to impart accurate information, I think doled out carefully, but to impart a concept of how to look at art and how to peel away the layers, as you put it, and to how to enjoy the art and not worry about all of the factoids, as you call them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Betty.
Okay, first of all, I wanted to answer Pat's question. There has been quite a bit of research done on VTS, and if you Google around, you can find it. The University Museum where I was working before did an extended study over 8 years of students, classroom students, both university and elementary, middle, and high school students, tracking multiple visits and an increase in visual thinking strategies and an increase in knowledge of how to look at a work of art, enjoyment of looking at art. That was one study. There have been hundreds of studies done, so Google around.
Yeah, I Googled it. That's not what I asked, though.
Okay.
I'm not questioning whether it's a.
There have been university
mechanism.
studies. The VTS industry has also done studies. So yes, it has been shown. It works best not as a one-time experience, as Bob said, as we used to do multiple visits. So if a classroom would come 3 times, we would say we have a museum goer for a lifetime. So it's not a one-time thing. When somebody walks in the door and they're from Minneapolis or they're from somewhere else and they're just here to see San Diego Museum of Art, VTS is not appropriate. They want to see as much as they can see in an hour or 30 minutes now.
Okay, that's helpful. And yeah, I actually did Google and I saw those studies, but yes, they are oriented toward teaching and multiple visits. And I'm not even asking about that. I was thinking more like the one-time tourist who's in town, or like myself when I'm actually paying for a tour and I'm never going to ever be there again in that museum.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so if you go to the National Gallery or the Portrait Gallery in DC, you'll have a VTS tour. Just to warn you, as a VTS person doing the tour, they're happy to answer your questions, to give you more information, but that is the standard in those museums. So it depends on where you go. Many people want information. Many other people want experiences and to really understand 1 or 2 works of art that they can take with them rather than an overview. So it just depends on what you're after.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Bob? No? I've lost everybody here. Hang on. Here we go. Okay. Well, Bob, we're really looking forward to Wednesday and seeing this in action. I
Oh,
think
great.
it's,
All right. What time do you want me to come to the class?
let's have you do your presentation first at 10 o'clock. And you think the 4 will take about an hour?
It depends how chatty the group is to some degree, but I think the impression I'm getting is that we could probably count on about 50 minutes or so.
Okay, great. And then we'll do the other thing we have on the agenda for Wednesday is the rest of the 3 object tours. So we'll have plenty of time to do all of that, but we'll do that after Bob's presentation. So,
Just to clarify though, Bob's not doing this in the classroom, right? He's doing it in the galleries.
actually he's using prints that we can't see because they're not on the walls, they're in the vaults. So we are going to have to do it on PowerPoint in the classroom.
We can't crowd this many people in the classroom. That was the whole point of the way we're doing training.
Yeah.
So I'll need to see if I can find the boardroom availability or something where we can spread out more.
Okay.
Because
Jim, that happened because I was encouraged to do a Japanese oriented tour so that, finding appropriate works of art to encourage that kind of discussion, that 3 of them are wood blocks and the other is a painting. And the painting is actually on exhibition, but that's how that came about.
yeah, understood. Well, we'll work out the details, but we're not going to be able to crowd everyone into the docent office. That's just too crowded. So Michelle and I can work it out and we'll just tell you what's happening on Wednesday morning when you get there.
Perfect.
Okay. Terrific. So any concerns about anything at all, whether it's VTS or 3 object exercise or anything before we go? Okay.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Bob.
Bob.
That
That was
was an
great.
excellent presentation. And I appreciate the opportunity to hear more about VTS because it's something as you know, Bob, from your discussions with me, I don't know much about.